One of the things that we have heard here in the West, and I wanted to get your perspective on it, is that in the run-up to what happened on October 7th, for many, many years, Israel was allowing, the Israeli government was allowing Qatar to pump money into Hamas and using that in effect to strengthen Hamas against the Palestinian Authority to prevent a united Palestinian state. What do you say to those claims?
In an effort to desperately launder his reputation in the middle of carrying out a genocide in Gaza and the annexation and land theft in the West Bank, Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is granting interviews to friendlies, individuals who are diehard Zionists and supporters of the state of Israel. Trigonometry was the latest one, and to Konstantin Kissin's credit, in this case, he did ask Netanyahu an important question, specifically whether Netanyahu had facilitated the funding for Hamas. Let's see if he's willing to tell the truth for once in his life.
No way.
Israel was allowing, the Israeli government was allowing Qatar to pump money into Hamas and using that in effect to strengthen Hamas against the Palestinian Authority to prevent a united Palestinian state. What do you say to those claims?
Well, I think it's hogwash. I mean, we're stuck with Hamas. I was actually against leaving Gaza and resigned from the government when it did so, when it decided to tear out the settlements, because I said this will be overtaken by Hamas, and Hamas will use it as a platform, will use Gaza, a de facto Palestinian state in Gaza, to pellet us with missiles and rockets, the surrounding cities. This was poo-pooed by the government at the time. I thought it was insane. But once they gave up Gaza, that's exactly what happened. Hamas took it over and turned it into a terror bastion. And the question was, what do you do with it? Well, there were various theories. One of it was that you have to aid the civilian population in such a way that you don't have diseases. So you've got to take care of the sewage, you've got to take care of electricity, you've got to make sure there's no famine there.
Benjamin Netanyahu, notorious for really sharing concern, engaging in behavior that would prevent something as disastrous as a famine in Gaza. Now, obviously he's lying, and unfortunately and somewhat expectedly, Konstantin Kissin did not challenge him on his lie at all. He just kind of moves on to whether or not the war criminal he's speaking to was aware of Hamas's terror tunnels. So what is the truth? Well, the truth is actually documented in multiple publications, both American and Israeli. Let's start with an American publication because it turns out that even CNN reported about this in December of 2023, writing that in a series of interviews with key Israeli players conducted in collaboration with Israeli investigative journalism organization Shomrim, CNN was told Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu continued the cash flow to Hamas despite concerns raised from within his own government. So there was a widely reported meeting that Netanyahu held with members of his party, the Likud party, in early 2019, where he was quoted as saying that those who oppose the formation of a Palestinian state should support the transfer of funds to Hamas in Gaza. Now, why? Why is that? Well, look no further than Israeli publication, The Times of Israel. This headline will help you look up the piece if you want to read it for yourselves. For years, Netanyahu propped up Hamas. Now it's blown up in our faces. In it, Tal Schneider writes that Benjamin Netanyahu took an approach that divided power between the Gaza Strip and the West Bank, bringing Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas to his knees while making moves that propped up the Hamas terror group. The idea, what was the idea? The idea was to prevent Abbas or anyone else in the Palestinian Authority's West Bank government from advancing toward the establishment of a Palestinian state. Most of the time, Israeli policy was to treat the Palestinian Authority, which by the way, played by the rules, collaborated with Israel, tried to do everything possible to, have a peaceful formation of a Palestinian state. But that's a threat to Israel because they don't want a Palestinian state. They want to do the Greater Israel Project, especially Likud, which has the Greater Israel Project as part of their charter. So how can you, delegitimize the Palestinian Authority and instead prop up Hamas to essentially make the Palestinians look like a dangerous terror group that can't have a state, because if they do have a state, Cenk, they're gonna be a huge threat to the Israeli people. Let me read the rest of that graphic. Far-right MK Bezalel Smotrich, now the finance minister in the hardline government and leader of the religious Zionism party, said so himself in 2015. So this has been the policy, prop up Hamas to delegitimize the whole idea of forming a Palestinian state. That's what they did. And let's not forget that it literally took hours for IDF soldiers to respond to the Hamas attacks on October 7th. Let's also remember that there were 2 instances in which Israeli officials came across intelligence indicating that Hamas was planning that terror attack. And more importantly, the second piece of intel they received made it clear that they intended on kidnapping hundreds of hostages. But they didn't act on that. The Israeli government, notoriously paranoid about everything, didn't act on that intelligence. Interesting. And then now you have Israeli soldiers testifying, okay? And you can look up these videos. They're testifying, they're showing their identity, they're doing it publicly. Testifying that they were told to stand down on the morning of October 7th. Why? Why were they told to stand down? Why isn't that being addressed in the American media? I mean, to the credit of Israeli publications and Israeli media, they're covering it. But here in the United States, you have a huge population of Americans who have essentially absorbed all of the pro-Israeli slop without realizing that the current government of Israel just sat back and allowed October 7th to happen and are lashing out at everyone else instead of taking responsibility for their failures. Cenk.
So Netanyahu also in one of these interviews explained how he wants to take over more of American media. I'm going to get to that in a second. But we know that the Israeli government, that's reported everywhere, was aware of that October 7th was being planned. And they say, oh man, that's just the one that got past the goalie. I mean, we thought, they have the paragliders and the most sophisticated attack that's ever been done. I mean, because Palestinians basically have nothing. The paragliders are gigantic. But
when are we gonna have paraglider control, Cenk?
Yeah.
Common sense paraglider control.
So the Israelis know where every single Hezbollah leader, Hamas leader, Iranian diplomat, blah, blah, blah is at any moment. They've got the pagers, they've got.
They can assassinate an Iranian nuclear scientist through a strike that goes through the window of their apartment. That's how sophisticated Israel can be if they want to be.
Oh, there's a huge, like almost an army-like attack coming across the border. We thought it was not important.
We did not expect this.
And there's IDF soldier on tape going, I don't know why they told us to stand down. We were there from 5:20 in the morning to 9 o'clock. They wouldn't let us patrol the border. Come on, guys. So now it's not just Netanyahu. Ariel Sharon and the right wing and Likud government has constantly encouraged Hamas for the same reason. Well, there's 2 reasons. The one that Anna mentioned, which is to split the Palestinians in 2, divide and conquer. The Palestinian Authority is too strong in their opinion, so you create Hamas. And so then Hamas will weaken Palestinian Authority, and then, but that'll create more terrorism. But that leads to reason number 2. Anytime they can claim self-defense, it allows them to take more land. So like in 1948, they had 6% of the land, all of a sudden they get 50%, but now driving out all the Palestinians, they're gonna need an excuse. Because what are they gonna do, let the Palestinians stay, then they'll be outvoted, and then that's the end of the Jewish state on day 1, right? So they've gotta slaughter them and move them out, and they did. 750 to 800,000 Palestinians ran for their lives. Here in America, we're told this hilarious fable about, oh yeah, the Arabs attacked the poor Israelis. They had to do self-defense. And so all of a sudden the Palestinians are slaughtered, they and the rest run for their lives, like I told you. And all of a sudden they have, in 1967, they attack all of their neighbors, destroy all of their air forces, and they claim self-defense. So my point to you guys is twofold. One is they love divide and conquer. They've been supporting Hamas throughout. By the way, they now have a new militia they're supporting in Gaza that we told you about a week ago. that is supposed to split Hamas.
Oh my God, that's just.
Okay, so that new militia, by the way, will one day do a terrorist attack against Israel. And then Israel will take Lebanon or Syria or wherever they want to take next. Meanwhile, by the way, encouraging terrorism because they think it might help Israel. Netanyahu was asked right after 9/11 what he thought of 9/11. Now, I'm not saying anything, guys. All I'm doing is reading you his quote, okay? He said, quote, "It's very good." And the reporter was like, "It's very good?" Right? And Netanyahu then realizes, oh, I shouldn't have said that out loud. And he says, well, not very good, but it will generate immediate sympathy and strengthen the bond between our two peoples. Interesting. So he thought 9/11 was very good. He looked the other way on October 7th. And this is our special ally.
Special ally.
Special ally. Okay, now I turn to the next thing he said in the interviews. He said, and this is a quote, "We must deal with the social media algorithms." So they had mainstream media on complete lockdown. Now they still do, but it's irrelevant now because there's social media. And so they're getting swarmed with the smartphone footage and all this. So then they try to shut down TikTok. And Mitt Romney and other politicians said on tape, we're not doing it because of China, we're doing it because of Israel. They want to shut down TikTok. And now TikTok, by the way, in September has now hired a person that will now report to Israel.
A former IDF soldier who is now working for the app to censor anti-Semitic posts.
Yeah, that's a joke. Of course, anything that's anti-Israel now going to get banned there, right? Because they say, well, if you don't do that, we're going to make you sell it and you're going to lose hundreds of billions of dollars. So that political influence allows them to control that amount of money, which allows TikTok to go, yes, sir, we will now serve Israel starting in September 13th. We will serve Israel loyally, sir. Okay? And now Netanyahu says, no, I want all the social media algorithms. You in America are not allowed to criticize Israel. Know your role, you serve me, okay? And Americans, we're sitting here going, can any of our politicians stand up to this guy? This guy who's like a modern day Goebbels and Hitler. He's bragging about how he's murdering 20,000 children right in front of our eyes, starving the Palestinians to death. Like a despotic figure like we haven't seen in so long. And American media bows down to him and American politicians bow down to him. 2% of Congress says Palestinians should be a state. The rest of Congress is like, we serve Israel loyally. No, this is gonna lead to a ton of trouble. And I don't want the trouble, guys, going in the wrong places. For the billionth time, not against Jewish Americans, does not have to do with religion. Greatest fighters we have, Dave Smith, Robert, I don't want to name names, they're wonderful, okay? And they're for peace and they're for America, okay? You should take your ire out on the disgustingly corrupt politicians we have and the disgustingly corrupt mainstream media we have. That in the face of overwhelming evidence that Israel controls our politicians and has taken $310 billion from Americans and is now using it for a genocide. They say, no, we serve Israel loyally. It's disgusting and you should be enraged about it.
All right, we're gonna talk a little bit about why Ben Rhodes is so furious at the free press. Recent piece talks about starvation in Gaza. We'll get into the details and more when we come back.
Every time you ring the bell below, an angel gets his wings. Totally not true, but it does keep you updated on our live shows.